Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to embark on a historic visit to the United States next week. The US Ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, described the relationship to me as the world's most critical relationship at the moment. And The Economist magazine, in its latest cover, describes Indo-US ties as the world's most important transaction. To talk about the deepening ties between India and the United States, I'm joined on the news track today by a man who has a deep understanding and love for both India and the US. My guest on India today is one of the world's top foreign affairs gurus, Fareed Zakaria. Fareed, welcome back. It's always a pleasure.
Always good to talk to you, Rahul.
Thank you so much for taking out time in a very busy schedule. I want to get straight to the point and straight to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's big visit to Washington, D.C. next week. India seems excited. The US seems excited. What are you expecting will emerge from this big state visit, which is only the third state visit of the Biden administration?
So first, that is, the symbolism is important. Biden has not had a lot of state visits, and I think he's trying to signal with this one that the Indian relationship is indeed as critical as you were describing. I think the important thing to remember is that this is part of a long train of events at this point that crosses both political parties in the United States and both coalitions in India. So you can think of this as really beginning with the end of the Cold War and Bill Clinton beginning to make overtures to India, but there were still many difficulties. The US was still caught in the kind of anti-proliferation mindset and was viewing India through that, even though Clinton clearly wanted to build ties. After that came the Bush administration, which really made the decisive break and brought India into the fold on the nuclear issue, essentially granting India all the things that India had asked for 30 years. It was a really extraordinary deal negotiated by Manmohan Singh and the Bush administration. Since then, what you have seen is just ever increasing and ever strengthening ties. And I think it's fair to say that in the last 5 years, you have seen another step function rise, which is the strengthening of real defense ties. That is the Quad, that is India's decision to buy more non-Russian equipment, more Western equipment. So I think you are seeing a sea change. But like the metaphor of the sea, these are slow-moving but very powerful forces. And so I suspect you're not going to see one dramatic announcement of any kind. I think what's really happening is a kind of transformation of India's relationship with the US.
The Economist magazine, which has in the past been massively critical of the Indian government and particularly the Prime Minister, in its latest cover calls the Indo-US relationship as the world's most important transaction. Is that what it is? Because India not wanting to come into the purview of the NATO alliance, wanting to stay slightly away from any formal treaty with the US. So is this really a transactional relationship?
No, I didn't like that characterization, and I think it's not accurate. I think, look, there's always been a civilizational attraction between India and the US. You can go back to Nehru coming to the United States during the Truman administration, then the Eisenhower administration, then of course the famous visits between Jacqueline Kennedy coming to India and Nehru going to visit John Kennedy. So there have always been this the idea of the world's most powerful democracy and the world's biggest democracy having a kind of natural alliance. And there are many, many similarities between the two countries. They're both open, diverse, messy, chaotic countries that to a lot of people outside look like they're kind of, too chaotic. And, Galbraith used to call India functioning anarchy. I don't think somebody would say quite that about America, but, on its bad days, America sometimes looks like functioning anarchy as well. So there's that much deeper tie than a transaction would suggest. But it's true that there has become a practical element. We've now seen a practical element introduced with the rise of China. The rise of China is the single most important geopolitical factor of the last 25 years. And naturally, every country's foreign policy is being reoriented on the basis of that shift. The US has shifted, Europe has shifted, every country in the world has shifted. India naturally is looking at that and asking itself, what does that mean? I think India is trying to find a way to, in a sense, have its cake and eat it too. That is, maintain economic ties with China, which are essential because it needs to grow, and China is the second largest economy in the world, but maintain deeper and deeper political and diplomatic ties. But I suspect that what you will see is the growth of the people-to-people relationship between India and the United States will grow by leaps and bounds and will almost overwhelm everything else. Because these, as you know, India, when you look at the polls, India is one of the most pro-American countries in the world. When you poll Americans, they have very favorable understanding of India. And it's because, I think, of the similarities. So, there's the state-to-state transaction, but, the United States has a state-to-state transaction with Saudi Arabia. There is no love between the two societies. I think there is going to be, between India and America, a deep relationship between the people, not just the government.